The HOA president didn't just send angry letters and petty complaints. She actually tried to destroy my sister's life-saving medical device just days before her critical heart surgery. When the doctor discovered what this woman had done, he immediately called the police without hesitation. What she did next shocked everyone who heard about it. This is a true story of betrayal, survival, and ultimate justice that will break your heart and then restore your faith in humanity. Before you hear this full story, please comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing true stories like this one. The phone call that changed everything came on an ordinary Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting at my desk at work, staring at my computer screen, trying to focus on a project presentation I was preparing. I was working on spreadsheets and timelines, just going through the motions of a normal workday. My cell phone suddenly buzzed on my desk, vibrating insistently. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. My sister was calling me during work hours, which was unusual. Something deep in my gut immediately told me this wasn't going to be a casual call about dinner plans or weekend hangout ideas. There was something about the timing that felt wrong. When I answered, my sister's voice was shaking with emotion. I could hear the fear and worry in every word she spoke. She told me news that would completely shatter both our worlds in an instant. "Marcus, I have a severe heart condition," she said, her voice breaking. "The doctors are saying I need surgery. Soon. I'm really scared." Sarah was only 28 years old, still in the prime of her life, with so much ahead of her. She worked as a registered nurse at County Hospital, which was one of the very best hospitals in our entire state. She spent her days caring for other people, bringing comfort to scared patients, holding their hands through the darkest and most frightening moments of their lives. She was exactly the kind of person the world desperately needed, genuinely kind, deeply compassionate, remarkably strong. She was someone who saw people not as problems to be solved, but as human beings deserving of care, dignity, and respect. Now, suddenly, and without warning, she was the one who needed someone to take care of her. The roles had completely reversed in the most terrifying way imaginable. When I hung up the phone with Sarah, my hands were shaking. I immediately called the hospital and managed to get Dr. James Mitchell on the line. My entire world collapsed into pieces as he explained the situation to me. "Your sister has a very severe cardiac condition," Dr. Mitchell explained to me. His voice was calm, but undeniably serious. The voice of a man who had delivered this devastating news 1,000 times before, to 1,000 different families. "Her heart valve is severely damaged and deteriorating. The tissue surrounding the valve has deteriorated significantly. Her heart isn't pumping blood efficiently through her body anymore. She's experiencing irregular heartbeats that are becoming more frequent and more dangerous." He paused, letting me absorb this information before continuing. "If we don't operate soon," he said carefully, "her condition will deteriorate rapidly and progressively. She could have a cardiac event, a serious heart attack, absolutely, anytime. It could happen while she's sleeping peacefully in her bed. It could happen while she's at work caring for patients. It could happen while she's standing in line at the grocery store. Without this surgery, we're looking at a very grim prognosis for your sister." I asked the question. I was absolutely terrified to ask the question that would keep me awake at night for years afterward. "Will she survive the surgery?" "I've performed this specific operation hundreds of times over my career," Dr. Mitchell said firmly and confidently. "I've been a cardiac surgeon for 20 years now. Your sister is young, and aside from this heart condition, she's otherwise healthy and strong. That's definitely in her favor. Her recovery should be strong because of her age and overall health. But I won't lie to you, Marcus. Open heart surgery is always serious. There are always risks involved, no matter how skilled the surgeon is. But I genuinely believe I can fix her heart. I believe I can give her her life back. But we need to do this very soon, within 3 weeks at most. Her condition is deteriorating, and we can't wait much longer." 3 weeks. I had exactly 3 weeks to prepare my sister for the fight of her life. 3 weeks to be strong for her while my own world was falling apart inside. 3 weeks to make sure she knew she wasn't alone and that I would be there for her no matter what happened. I did what I always do when facing a crisis. I showed up immediately. That very afternoon, I walked straight into my boss's office and told him I was taking an indefinite leave of absence from work. I didn't wait for his response or listen to his arguments about deadlines and projects. I called my landlord and informed him I was breaking my apartment lease early. I packed a large bag with clothes, books, and everything I might need for an extended stay. By that evening, I was at Sarah's house in Meadowbrook Heights, moving my belongings into her guest bedroom, ready to be whatever she needed me to be during this crisis. Our mother had died 5 years earlier from complications of diabetes. I had been there for every single hospital visit, every difficult and painful moment. Every time she was scared or in pain or felt alone. I had learned through that experience what it truly meant to be strong for someone you love deeply. To set aside your own fear and terror and become the rock they need to lean on. I had learned that sometimes loving someone means simply showing up, being physically present, and refusing to leave even when everything feels completely hopeless. Now I would do the same thing for my sister. There was no question in my mind. When I arrived at her house that evening, Sarah held me tight and we both cried together. She was terrified of the surgery. I was terrified about losing her, but we had each other, and that would have to be enough to get us through this nightmare. Sarah lived in Meadowbrook Heights, which was a quiet suburban neighborhood, located about 30 minutes from the hospital. She had bought her charming little 3-bedroom house 2 years earlier with her own money, saving carefully and diligently from her nursing salary, dreaming of a place that would be truly hers. It was supposed to be her sanctuary, her dream home, a place of peace and safety, where she could build the life she wanted and deserved. The backyard had a beautiful old oak tree that had been standing there for decades, providing shade and beauty. Sarah loved to sit under that tree in the evenings with a cup of hot tea, watching the sun slowly set over the peaceful neighborhood. She had painted her front door a cheerful, bright blue color because it made her smile and feel happy every single time she came home from a long shift at the hospital. She had planted a garden filled with roses, wildflowers, and fragrant herbs. It was absolutely perfect. It was hers. It was everything she had worked for and dreamed about. But her peace and happiness were completely shattered by one woman, Patricia Henderson, the HOA president. Everyone in the neighborhood called her Karen behind her back. Sometimes they even called her that to her face when they were angry enough and had finally reached their breaking point. Patricia had been systematically making Sarah's life absolutely miserable from the very first moment Sarah moved into the neighborhood. Patricia was the type of woman who would actually measure grass blades with a ruler to make sure they were exactly the right height, according to her standards. She was the type of woman who would send formal complaint letters about flowers being 1 inch too tall, about cars parked on the street for supposedly too long, about slightly crooked mailboxes, or the wrong color. She lived in the biggest house on the entire street, a sprawling mansion with iron gates, marble columns, and a perfectly manicured lawn that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine spread about wealthy suburbs. She wore designer clothes that probably cost more than Sarah's entire monthly mortgage payment. She had a smile that could freeze a room solid, a laugh that sounded like breaking ice, and a particular way of making people feel small and insignificant just by looking at them with disdain. The very first HOA notice arrived within 2 weeks of Sarah moving into her new home. The complaint stated that her beautiful roses were too tall. They violated Section 3, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws, according to Patricia. The second notice came just 1 month later. It stated that her front door was not an approved color according to community standards and needed to be repainted immediately to comply with regulations. The third notice complained about Sarah's best friend, Jessica's car being parked on the street too often and supposedly looking unsightly and bringing down property values. Each notice was typed formally on official HOA letterhead, printed on expensive high-quality paper, and signed in bold, flowing calligraphy by Patricia Henderson, HOA president. Each one felt like a deliberate, calculated attack, a clear message that Sarah wasn't welcome here, that she didn't belong in this neighborhood. Over the next 2 years, Patricia sent notice after notice after notice. Complaints about flowers, complaints about the mailbox being slightly crooked, complaints about a potted plant on the porch that was supposedly aesthetically inappropriate, complaints about trash cans being left out one day too long, complaints about the color of Sarah's shutters, complaints about the height of her hedges, complaints about the neighborhood not being welcoming to Jessica's frequent visits anymore. Each letter was formal, threatening, and carefully designed to make Sarah feel small, unwelcome, and uncomfortable in her own home, the home she had worked so hard to buy. I later learned that Patricia did this same thing to everyone in the neighborhood who didn't meet her impossibly high standards. There was a man who lived 3 streets over, whose roses she had complained about constantly and relentlessly. He eventually had a stress-induced heart attack and was forced to move away. There was an elderly woman who had received so many threatening notices that she eventually sold her beloved house and moved away, unable to take the constant harassment and intimidation anymore. There were families with young children who had been told that their children's toys violated the neighborhood code and had to be stored away out of sight every single night without exception. Patricia had made it her personal mission to control this entire neighborhood through fear, intimidation, and constant threats. She seemed to need someone to torment and control the way some people need oxygen to breathe. Sarah had learned over the 2 years to ignore most of the petty notices as best she could. She focused instead on her important work at the hospital, on helping sick people, on being kind and compassionate to everyone around her. But ignoring Patricia was becoming increasingly impossible as Patricia's obsession with control grew more intense and more personal. When Sarah received her devastating diagnosis from Dr. Mitchell, medical equipment started arriving at her house over the course of just a few days. There was a heart monitor device that she needed to wear constantly, every single moment of every day. Small adhesive pads were attached to her chest with sticky medical adhesive, connected by thin wires to a larger monitor unit that tracked every single heartbeat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was an oxygen tank for when her breathing became labored and difficult. There was blood pressure monitoring equipment so she could track her vital signs multiple times throughout the day. There were medications in various bottles and packages scattered throughout her house. All of this equipment was absolutely life-saving. Dr. Mitchell had prescribed it after careful examination and extensive testing. It was necessary for her survival until the surgery could be safely performed. The heart monitor, especially, was critical, essential, and completely non-negotiable. It was monitoring her precarious condition every single moment of every single day, tracking every irregular beat, recording crucial data that would be necessary for Dr. Mitchell to have before performing the risky surgery. Without the monitor providing this baseline information, Dr. Mitchell wouldn't have the detailed data he desperately needed to make the surgery as safe as possible for Sarah. But when Patricia saw some of this medical equipment sitting in Sarah's driveway, partially visible from the street, she didn't see Sarah's lifeline. She didn't see the medical necessity or the desperate need. She didn't see a young woman fighting for her life. She saw only a violation of neighborhood aesthetics. She saw something that didn't fit her perfect, controlled vision of the perfect neighborhood. She saw an opportunity to exert more control and power. The first HOA notice regarding the medical equipment arrived just 3 days after it had been delivered. It was the coldest, most threatening notice Patricia had sent yet. Patricia wrote in harsh, formal language that the unsightly medical devices that were visible from the street were a direct violation of Section 4, Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws regarding the appearance and maintenance of properties. She demanded that Sarah remove all visible equipment within 48 hours or face immediate legal action. The language was harsh, threatening, and carefully calculated to intimidate and frighten. It was deliberately designed to make Sarah comply through fear. I personally showed Patricia a detailed, official letter from Dr. Mitchell, explaining with medical precision the critical medical necessity of every single device. I explained as carefully and clearly as I possibly could that Sarah had a severe and life-threatening heart condition. I told her that Sarah needed this equipment to stay alive until her surgery could be performed. I tried desperately to make her understand that this wasn't about aesthetics or property values. This was about basic survival. This was about keeping my sister alive. Patricia read Dr. Mitchell's letter with visible disdain on her face, as if what this respected cardiac surgeon had written meant absolutely nothing to her. "Rules are rules," she said coldly, her voice cutting like shards of ice. "Perhaps the equipment could be moved to the basement where it wouldn't be visible from the street. The heart monitor needs to be accessible to her at all times," I explained, trying desperately hard to remain calm despite my growing fury. "If she has a cardiac event, if her heart starts failing, she needs to be able to reach this equipment in seconds. She needs to be able to call for help immediately. Moving it to the basement could literally cost her her life. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" "That's really not my problem," Patricia replied dismissively. Then she actually closed the door in my face. Over the next 5 days, 4 more threatening notices arrived at Sarah's house. Each one was more threatening than the previous one. Lawyers' language started appearing in the formal notices. Words and phrases like legal proceedings, breach of contract, and forced removal appeared throughout the threatening documents. Patricia was deliberately escalating the situation, increasing the pressure steadily, making it absolutely clear that she was not going to stop. She was not going to back down. She was not going to show any compassion or basic human understanding for Sarah's life-threatening medical situation. The constant stress was systematically destroying my sister both physically and mentally. Her anxiety was through the roof at levels that were genuinely dangerous for someone in her precarious health condition. Her heart condition was actually getting measurably worse from the constant worry and fear. She couldn't sleep at night. Her heart was skipping beats more frequently. The surgery was supposed to happen in just 4 more days. She was supposed to be calm, centered, and mentally and physically prepared for the operation. Instead, she was falling apart completely. Her body and mind were both deteriorating rapidly under the relentless pressure and stress. 3 days before the scheduled surgery, everything came to a terrifying head in a moment that would change all our lives forever. I had gone to the pharmacy to pick up Sarah's pre-surgery medications. Dr. Mitchell had given her a specific, detailed list of things she needed to take before the operation: special supplements to strengthen her body, medications to stabilize her irregular heart rhythm, and things that would help prepare her physically for the enormous stress of major surgery. Sarah was home alone, resting at the house, as the doctor had specifically instructed. She was wearing her heart monitor, the small, life-saving device attached to her chest. This device was keeping her alive by tracking every single heartbeat, every irregularity, every potentially dangerous moment. It was her lifeline, the single most important thing she owned in the world. She was sitting peacefully in the backyard, under the beautiful oak tree, trying desperately to find just a moment of peace and calm in the chaos of her life. The late afternoon sun was warm and comforting on her face. For just one brief moment, she wasn't a sick woman awaiting life or death surgery. She was just Sarah, sitting under a tree on a beautiful day, listening to the birds singing. That's when she saw Patricia approaching. Patricia was walking into the yard with a young man beside her, someone Sarah recognized as working for Patricia's professional landscaping company. Sarah watched in growing confusion as Patricia pointed very deliberately at the heart monitor equipment that sat inside the house through the open sliding glass door, clearly visible from the yard. The monitor was a large machine with a digital screen, multiple wires, and blinking lights. It was essential, life-saving equipment, a device that was literally saving her life moment by moment, keeping her alive until surgery. Sarah's nursing instinct kicked in immediately and powerfully. That internal alarm system that had saved countless patients during her nursing career suddenly screamed a warning. Something felt dangerously wrong, very wrong. It was like that moment right before a car accident, when time seems to slow down dramatically, and every sense becomes heightened and aware. Sarah had felt this particular instinct many times during her work as a nurse, those moments when she noticed something was seriously off with a patient, before any test or monitor confirmed it. She had learned through years of experience to trust her gut completely, to listen to that inner voice that screamed warnings even when she couldn't quite explain why logically. Patricia smiled at the young man in a way that made Sarah's blood run cold. She said something that Sarah couldn't hear clearly from her position under the tree, but Patricia's voice sounded smooth, confident, and persuasive. Then Patricia gestured inside the house, pointing directly toward the heart monitor equipment. She was clearly giving him explicit, detailed instructions about what to do. Sarah watched in growing horror as the young man began walking purposefully toward the house, heading directly toward the equipment that was keeping her alive. Every instinct in Sarah's body screamed a warning that was almost physical in its intensity. Something was terribly, dangerously wrong. Patricia was trying to do something to the equipment, something that would hurt Sarah, or possibly even kill her. Sarah stood up from under the tree as fast as she could manage. Her legs were unsteady from her heart condition and the constant stress. Her heart was already racing in her chest, making every sudden movement potentially dangerous. But she pushed through the pain and fear anyway, driven by pure survival instinct. She hurried inside as fast as she could. She arrived just as the young man was reaching out toward the heart monitor device with his hand. His fingers were just inches away from touching it. "Stop!" Sarah screamed, her voice sharp, commanding, and filled with terror. "Don't touch that equipment." The young man jumped back, visibly startled. His hand snapped away from the equipment, as if it had suddenly burned him. He looked confused and almost embarrassed, completely unsure what was happening or why this woman was yelling at him. He looked toward Patricia, seeking guidance and an explanation for why this woman was screaming. Patricia was still standing in the doorway, her expression carefully, unreadable, and controlled. For just one brief moment, Sarah saw something dark and cruel flash across Patricia's face, something cold, calculating, and genuinely malicious. Something that revealed the true nature of what Patricia had been deliberately trying to do. Then the mask came back, the practiced smile, the smooth facade of respectability. "I was just going to move the equipment to the basement for you," Patricia said smoothly, her voice like silk covering broken glass, so it would be out of sight from the street. "I thought I was helping you, Sarah. I was trying to find a compromise that would work for everyone." But Sarah wasn't fooled for even a second. Her nurse's intuition, honed by years of experience in emergencies, screamed that this was a complete lie. Patricia hadn't been trying to help at all. She had been deliberately trying to get that life-saving equipment moved, possibly to damage it permanently, to disable it completely. Patricia had deliberately arranged for someone else to do her dirty work, so she could claim complete innocence if caught, so she could deny everything and pretend she had good intentions. Sarah's hands were shaking uncontrollably now. Her heart was racing dangerously fast, far faster than was remotely safe for someone in her precarious condition. She could feel the irregular beating in her chest, feel the skipped beats, feel the fear flooding through her veins like ice water coursing through her body. This woman, this neighbor she lived near, this woman who had been making her life difficult with petty notices and complaints for 2 years, had almost gotten someone to disable the one thing keeping her alive. She had almost succeeded in killing her. "Do not touch my medical equipment," Sarah said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "Ever. This equipment is keeping me alive. My doctor prescribed it. It's saving my life every moment of every day. And if anything happens to it, if it gets damaged or disabled, I could die. Do you understand me? I could have a cardiac event right here in my house. Without this monitor, no one would know what's happening to me. I could collapse and die alone on my floor." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, her entire body shaking with emotion and fear. "Get out of my house," she said firmly, her voice gaining strength. "Get out right now, or I'm calling the police. I mean it. Leave immediately." Patricia left, but the damage was already done. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep at all. She kept checking the heart monitor obsessively, watching her irregular heartbeats displayed on the digital screen. The extreme stress had triggered episodes of dangerous arrhythmia. Her heart was acting erratically, skipping beats frequently, racing at dangerous speeds. The surgery was in just 2 days now. She was supposed to be calm, rested, and prepared. Instead, she was terrified and traumatized by what Patricia had almost succeeded in doing to her. When I came home that evening and found Sarah in tears, she told me everything that had happened. She told me about Patricia's deliberate attempt to sabotage her medical equipment. I felt rage unlike anything I had ever experienced in my entire life. But I didn't lose control of my emotions. Instead, I did exactly what needed to be done. I called Dr. Mitchell immediately and told him everything in complete detail. "That's a serious crime," Dr. Mitchell said, his voice cold and professional, but filled with underlying fury. "Tampering with medical equipment is the same as tampering with life support devices. This is very, very serious. I'm calling the police right now. I'm going to make absolutely sure this woman faces criminal charges for what she tried to do." The police arrived the very next morning. 2 officers, a man and a woman, both looking serious and professional. They took detailed statements from Sarah, carefully reviewed all of the medical equipment, photographed everything extensively, and documented everything thoroughly. They went to Patricia's house and questioned her at length. But the real breakthrough came when they reviewed security footage from a neighbor's camera system. Mr. Patterson, who lived 2 houses down from Sarah, had security cameras installed on his property. He had installed them years earlier after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. The cameras were always recording 24 hours a day, capturing everything that happened on the street. When the police reviewed the footage from the day of the incident, they found exactly what they needed: clear, undeniable evidence of Patricia's crime caught on video. The video showed Patricia clearly pointing at Sarah's heart monitor equipment through the open sliding glass door. It showed her gesturing to the young man with animated, deliberate hand movements. It showed her speaking to him with a cold, calculated expression on her face. The audio on the recording wasn't clear, but the intent was absolutely unmistakable and obvious to anyone watching. Patricia was deliberately directing someone to move or potentially damage Sarah's life-saving medical equipment. She was trying to do it through someone else to maintain plausible deniability if caught. The young man came forward immediately and cooperated fully with the investigation. He told police that Patricia had told him the medical equipment was a violation of neighborhood codes and needed to be moved to the basement immediately. He had absolutely no idea it was life support equipment. He had no idea he was being asked to participate in a crime. He felt terrible about what had almost happened and cooperated fully with the police. Dr. Mitchell provided a formal, detailed statement to the police, explaining with clinical precision and obvious anger exactly what would have happened if the heart monitor had been disabled or damaged. Without the monitor, we wouldn't have had the baseline data we absolutely need for the surgery, he explained to the police officers. We couldn't track her condition properly in the days leading up to the operation. Disabling it could have resulted in her having a cardiac event without proper medical response. It could have resulted in her death. This is not a minor violation. This is attempted murder. Patricia Henderson was arrested and charged with tampering with medical equipment and reckless endangerment of human life. The bail was set at $20,000. Her husband, humiliated and furious about what his wife had done, paid the bail within hours. But Patricia's life, as she had known it, was completely over. The case moved quickly through the legal system. The evidence was overwhelming and completely irrefutable. There was security footage showing her intent clearly. There was police testimony. There was Dr. Mitchell's expert witness statement. There was the young man's statement. There was a documented pattern of harassment in months and months of HOA notices. There was no possible defense. There was only the truth, caught on camera, for everyone to see. 3 months after Sarah's successful heart surgery, Patricia Henderson was convicted in court. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison for tampering with medical equipment and reckless endangerment. She was ordered to pay significant restitution to Sarah for medical bills and emotional suffering. The neighborhood immediately removed her as HOA president and completely rewrote the entire HOA bylaws from scratch. But the real victory, the real triumph, was Sarah herself. Her surgery was successful. Dr. Mitchell replaced her damaged valve and carefully repaired her heart tissue. The recovery was long and hard, with complications along the way. There was an infection that required strong antibiotics. There were nights when the monitors alarmed and nurses rushed in. But Sarah fought through it all with remarkable strength. Slowly, day by day, her heart grew stronger. She grew stronger in both body and spirit. 6 months after her surgery, Sarah returned to work at the hospital not as a victim, but as a survivor. She started a support group for cardiac patients. She gave talks about trusting your instincts. She spoke to people about standing up to those who try to hurt you. She spoke about the importance of protecting your peace when you're fighting for your life. 6 months after her surgery, Sarah returned to work at the hospital not as a victim, but as a survivor with a story to tell. She started a support group for cardiac patients who were facing the same fears she had faced. She gave talks at hospitals about trusting your medical instincts and standing up to those who try to hurt you when you're most vulnerable. The story of what Patricia had done spread throughout Meadowbrook Heights like wildfire. Neighbors who had been silently suffering under Patricia's tyranny for years finally spoke up. The man whose roses she had complained about shared his story publicly. The elderly woman who had moved away contacted the local news to tell her experience. Families with children talked openly about the constant harassment they had endured. The neighborhood realized they had all been living under the control of a woman who used fear and intimidation as weapons against them. The HOA completely transformed after Patricia's conviction. New bylaws were written that focused on genuine community safety rather than arbitrary aesthetic control. The new board removed all the provisions that had allowed one person to enforce vague rules however they wanted. They added a mandatory review period before any complaints could be filed. They required that an independent board member review all notices before they were sent to homeowners. The old HOA that had been a tool of tyranny was reborn as a genuine community organization that actually served the people who lived there. Gardens bloomed with wild colors again throughout the neighborhood. Children's toys appeared in front yards without fear of threatening letters. People painted their doors, whatever colors made them happy. Flowers grew to whatever height nature intended. The neighborhood transformed from a place of fear and control into a place of peace, acceptance, and genuine community. Years later, Sarah met David, a kind-hearted teacher who saw her not as a victim or a patient, but as the strongest person he had ever met. They fell in love slowly and deeply. When David proposed, Sarah knew exactly where she wanted to get married. They were married under that beautiful oak tree in her backyard on a perfect summer day. I walked her down the aisle with tears of joy streaming down my face. Dr. Mitchell attended and gave a toast that made everyone in attendance cry. Mr. Patterson, whose security cameras had captured the truth and saved Sarah's life, was honored as a special guest. Sarah made sure he sat in the front row. Sarah and David had 2 beautiful children, son and a daughter. Their son was named James, after Dr. James Mitchell, the man who had saved Sarah's life with his skilled hands. Their daughter was named Hope, because that's what Sarah's entire story represented to everyone who knew about it. Hope in the darkest moments. James and Hope grew up hearing their mother's story. They understood from a young age that life was precious and fragile, that kindness mattered deeply, that standing up for what's right was always worth it, even when it was difficult or scary. Sarah continued her work at County Hospital for many years. She didn't just do her regular nursing job. She became known throughout the entire region as a beacon of hope for people facing heart disease and cardiac surgery. Patients would specifically request her by name. Families would ask that she be part of their loved one's care team. She had a special gift for making scared people feel safe, just as she had done before her own diagnosis. But now, she brought something more powerful. She brought personal understanding, lived experience, and proof that the other side of surgery and recovery was worth fighting for. She had been where they were. She had been terrified. She had survived. And so could they. On the 20th anniversary of her life-saving surgery, Sarah stood under that oak tree with her entire family surrounding her. Marcus stood beside her. David held her hand. James and Hope sat at her feet. Dr. Mitchell, now retired, had driven 2 hours to be there. Mr. Patterson, now elderly, but still sharp, smiled warmly at her. The sun was warm on Sarah's face, just like it had been on that terrifying day, when everything changed forever. She thought about the disease that had tried to kill her from the inside. She thought about the cruelty that had tried to destroy her from the outside. She thought about the moment when she trusted her nursing instinct and saved her own life. She thought about Dr. Mitchell's steady hands. She thought about Marcus's unwavering support. She thought about justice and forgiveness. Most of all, she thought about hope. In the darkest moments of her life, when everything seemed impossible, when a woman she had never harmed was actively trying to destroy her, she had chosen to keep fighting. She had chosen to survive. She had chosen to thrive. Her heart beat strong and steady in her chest, just as Dr. Mitchell had promised all those years ago. Every single beat was a victory. Every single breath was a miracle. Every single day was a celebration of the precious, fragile, beautiful gift of life itself. Patricia Henderson had tried to destroy Sarah's life-saving equipment before her surgery. She had tried to stop Sarah's heart operation, but she had failed. Dr. Mitchell had called the police. Justice had been served. The neighborhood had been freed from tyranny, and Sarah had not just survived. She had thrived. She had built a beautiful life. She had helped hundreds of other patients. She had raised a family. She had loved deeply. She had forgiven. She had won in every way that mattered. As the sun set over Meadowbrook Heights that evening, Sarah looked around at all the people she loved. Her heart was full. Her life was rich. Her future was bright. And under that old oak tree, surrounded by love, Sarah smiled, because she knew the truth that had carried her through everything, even in our darkest moments. Even when cruel people try to destroy us, hope survives. Love survives. We survive. And sometimes, that survival is the greatest victory of all.